Hi, I'm John, and today we're going to talk about LocoFi. If you're sitting there wondering what the heck LocoFi is, I'll summarize for you. LocoFi is a module, much like a DCC decoder in terms of size and shape. So as you probably already guessed, you can install it just like a DCC decoder. The LocoFi module generates its own Wi-Fi network that can be accessed through the LocoFi app on an Android device to control the model. The power to the model can come from track, but it could also come from a battery instead of the track, which makes LocoFi a great candidate for dead rail applications. I did a more in-depth video about how to install a LocoFi module back in 2018, and you can find that video by clicking the link that just popped up if you want to learn more about the installation process. In this program, I'm going to install a module into an HO Scale locomotive, but that's not the main topic. You see, since its initial release, the LocoFi app has been updated many times, and one of the upgrades from earlier this year included something that I've been wanting to see: consisting locomotives. So that's what this video is really about. After I install the module into the model, I'll show you how to calibrate and consist two LocoFi-equipped models together. So let's head over to the workbench.
All right, so here's what I have to complete this process. I have a locomotive, obviously. This is an HO Scale Intermountain ET44AH. Then I have an Android phone. This is the module. It comes with a speaker. There's some wires and additional stuff in this package. And then this is a special bracket that LocoFi sells to assist with the installation into locomotives like this. We have our instructions for the LocoFi module installation. And then on the right side there, a bunch of tools that will enable me to open the locomotive, install this thing, solder up the connections, and so forth. So let's get started. All right, I got the locomotive out of the box, and luckily for us, it came with instructions on how to take it apart. And this will be very helpful because if you look on the locomotive itself, you'll see that it has this little brake chain on the fireman's side on the rear truck. The instructions explain how you can remove the shell without damaging anything. Well, the instructions said to carefully pull the chain off of these hooks up here, and when I pulled this out of the box, it was already like that, so I guess I won't have to carefully remove the brake chain springs from the hooks, because it's done. I am supposed to take the coupler boxes off very carefully, and I'm going to have to set these in a little container just off camera so that I don't lose them. So with all that stuff done, you can just gently lift the shell off, and we should be good to go. So as you can see, everything's apart now, and it has a bunch of electronic stuff already in here. My intention is to keep the existing wires so I don't have to make new connections, but at the same time, I'm going to remove all the rest of the electronic components, and I'm going to put in this handy little cradle that they've included in the package for me, and of course then the LocoFi module and speaker. And this should be really good because this cradle is made specifically to fit the LocoFi equipment in there. So now, because this video is not specifically about installing all the stuff and doing all the wiring, we have a different video about that. I'm not going to show you everything about installing it. We'll skim over that part, and then we'll get to the more important things, which is showing some of the new features of the LocoFi app. First things first is to get rid of this existing stuff. So I'm going to carefully, as carefully as I can, unplug these little connectors. So if you look here, you can see that all these wires that are connected to this little plug-in piece are color-coded. So hopefully That means that they are per NMRA standard. That should make connecting all the wires to the LocoFi module a lot easier, because you just have to then match up the colors. Same thing goes for back here. I looked at the little board that these were plugged into, and it appears that most of this stuff back here is track power or power for the motor. So, fun stuff. It looks like this mount that came with the Intermountain locomotive is connected by screws here and here. So I'm going to get my screwdriver and take those off. We're not going to need this mount. All right, so I taped the LocoFi mount down on the chassis, and this is a really cool mount. If you look, you can see the LocoFi module and speaker fit right on here. It looks like a really good fit. So what I'll be doing now is connecting all of the wires from the module to the corresponding wires that go to the various places in the locomotive. So lights and motor and that kind of thing. Now I also taped down the speaker to the chassis, and I'm doing something that might be a little controversial for some people here, which is to put the speaker facing down. Well, it's been my experience that speakers sound just as good, if not better, facing downward like this. And I may end up turning it over later if I don't like the sound that it reproduces. But generally speaking, this has been what works for me. I'm also going to tape down the module. That way everything will be nice and secure under the shell. The challenging part about this process is deciding which wires go to which place. For example, I have these red and black wires that come up from underneath, and red and black traditionally would be track power. Red comes from the engineer side and black comes from the fireman side. Well, I know that the LocoFi module, because I'm looking at the instructions here, tells me that red and black goes to the track power to the module as well. So the first thing I'll do is connect the track power from the locomotive to the LocoFi module. And then from there, it's just a process of doing the same thing with all the other wires. All right, so it's a couple hours, a few inches of solder, and a few cuss words later. There was some guesswork when it came to hooking up the wires, but the good news is I managed to make the front headlight, which is here, and the rear headlight, which is here, functional the way they're supposed to be. And something else I want to mention here is they have a new sound set. This sounds like an American prototype locomotive with a turbocharger on it. The horn is better than the old horn. And the bell seems a little better too. So I'm going to shut this down. Also, while I was putting the wiring together and testing things, I took a minute to make sure that the locomotive in fact runs in the correct directions. So when I turn it to go forward, it goes forward. When I turn it to go backwards, it goes backwards. All that's left right now is I'm going to sort of neaten up these wires because they're still kind of messy, like over here. I'm going to tape it all down, and I'm going to put the shell back on, and then we can test it with the shell on. So when I said I had to do some guesswork, there are a bunch of wires, and they rely on contact pads in the shell, and you don't know if it's going to work until you put the shell back on. And what I'd hoped to do is wire the ditch lights to come on with the headlight, and they do. So I guessed right. Now, if I wanted to be tricky, I could have wired up the ditch lights to the rear headlight function key, and I could turn on the ditch lights with a separate function, but I wanted it to work with a rear headlight, just in case I ever need a rear headlight for some reason. Okay, so I want to run one of our standard track tests before I do anything else. That way we can make sure everything's working the way it should be working. Okay, so it seems to be running pretty much how we expect it to run. Now let's put on the old one so that you can hear the old sound set. All right, so if you've been watching this channel for a while, you may recognize this locomotive. This is the Kato-9 that I put the original LocoFi module in. Geez, that was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And check out the difference in the sound set. So I don't know about you, but that sound doesn't really do much for me. Now the good news is there's a way to change the sound sets in these locomotives. And it's not terribly hard. I'm not going to show that in this video, but just know that the modules have a micro SD card on board, and that micro SD card has all the sounds on it. So changing the sounds on one of these is as simple as taking that SD card out and changing the sounds on it. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about installing the new module and trying the consisting. So that's what we're going to do next. All right, so we have decoders or modules installed in both of these locomotives. And what I'll do is I'll show you on the phone what you need to do to set up a speed table. For the sake of this video, we're just going to show you how to do the simple speed table setup. Just know that the complex speed table has more steps to it. So the next step to this process is we need to give each locomotive a speed table. That way they can actually be speed matched. And the way we do this is you set up a test track. And as you can see, I have a test track here. It's really testing the limit of my space in my studio that I record in here. But it fits, and I measured it. It's about 14 feet and 4 inches in length. They recommend to have at least 15 feet. This is what I have space for here, so it will have to suffice. But what you do now is you want to make sure that you're connected to the locomotive as your Wi-Fi network. So you go into your Wi-Fi settings on the Android device, and you can see it is connected, Loco UP9632. And I've actually named it that. There's a way to rename the networks that these things generate. But anyway, I'm going to go out of this, and I'm going to go to the LocoFi app. And the LocoFi app will tell us which locomotives are on the network. In this case, it can only be this one because I'm connected directly to it. And here, let me just show you real quick. If you see these little tools on the left side here, if you push that, this is where you can edit the name. That's where I named it UP9632. Anyway, at this point, I will hit the Manage button. It's right here. And then I will select 9632. It brings up the dashboard. That's what they call this. Once I have the dashboard up, I can go to these three dots on the right side of the screen on the top and push it and go to Configure. Now, this brings up your configuration screen. I've already made some changes to this locomotive, but the important thing is down here. It says Enable Scale Speeds and Consisting. You check that box and it brings up this menu. The first thing it asks for is the track voltage. I'm going to enter 14 because that's what this track was rated at with my multimeter when I tested it earlier. Then I'm going to do Start Speed Step. And you have to make sure that your track is clear, so do this only on an otherwise unoccupied test track. And it's better to have it in a circle like I do so that the locomotive doesn't take off on you and run off the desk or something. That's what that warning is all about. And this part was a little bit tricky for me. When you push this little slider, it activates this slider here. And now I can grab that slider and move it over until the locomotive starts moving. So I'm looking to the left of the screen here to see when the locomotive starts running. And this is basically telling the app how much voltage it needs to send to the model to get it to start moving. There, it just started moving. If you look down there, here I'll make it in focus for you, you can see that the locomotive is now moving. So now that we have that figured out, there's a number right there, 26. I'm going to check this little slider off and it will lock that in place. Now I'm going to tell it how long my test track is, right here, 14 feet and about 4 inches. Now it's getting me down to this area here. And the way this works is you push play and then you time how long it takes for the locomotive to go all the way around the track, and then you enter it in this yellow box. So I'm going to push play. I'm going to grab my iPhone, which is just off camera here, and I have it set on the stopwatch. And what I'll do, so you can see, is I'll start it when it gets to the wires that are feeding the electricity to the track, right there. And we're basically now just timing how long it takes to go 14 feet and 4 inches. And as soon as it gets there, I'll hit stop. It's about 16 seconds, almost 17. I'm going to do it again, and then that way we'll have 2 readings. And if we average them out, it'll be close to accurate. Here we go. They recommend to do a number of laps and enter the average of the number that you time. So makes sense. You want to get as accurate of a reading as possible. So we had 16.7 and this one is 16.64. So I think 17 seconds will work here. So I'm going to stop it. I'm going to enter time as 17 seconds. And it's telling me down here, that's scale 50 miles an hour. And once I hit locked, that saves my information there. And the last thing I'm going to do is down here, it says max scale speed. And again, this is a slider. And what I want to do is I want to set my max to 50 because I know that's how fast this thing will go. And now I'm going to save it. And it has saved to the locomotive now. And I'm going to repeat this process using the other locomotive, the CSX locomotive. So, starting back at the beginning, we're going to Wi-Fi networks. We're going to CSX 3262. We're going to back out of that. We're going to open LocoFi. We're going to manage. We're going to CSX 3262. Here's the dashboard. We go to the three dots, configure. We're going to tell it that we want to make a scale speed table. The track voltage was 14. We're going to test for the start speed step. Starting to move at 44. Going to lock it. We're going to tell it the track length is 14 feet and 4 inches. Then we're going to start it running using the play button. Now I have my iPhone with the timer. I should call it a stopwatch. That's really what it is. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the UP engine. .6. So I'm just going to call this 15. 15. All right. We're going to lock that in. And then the max scale speed I want for this locomotive also is actually going to be 50. This is key. If you make this able to go more than 50, it'll actually pull or push on the UP engine. So we're going to set that to 50 and we're going to save out of this. And now both of these engines are calibrated to work together. We need to add the UP engine to a network. So I have to go to the main menu here, hit the three dots, and I go to add a loco. I want to add 9632. Add to network down here. This is going to use a temporary Wi-Fi network. So it's going to link these two locomotives together by adding 9632, which is our trailing unit, to the CSX unit in front of it. So I backed out of the app and I reopened it, and now you can see it's populated with both locomotives. I want to go to the upper right corner and I want to create a consist. So I'm going to tell it that CSX 3262 is in the lead. That's L on this little column here. And I'm going to tell it that UP 9632 is the trailing unit, which is R. And then the direction of travel for the UP engine is actually reverse, because the CSX is facing toward us and the UP engine is facing away from us. And I hit consist down here. And you can see it's adding both engines to the consist. And now this is important. If you look up here, you can see that CSX 3262 is our main engine, and there's a little 9632 down here telling you that these two locomotives are connected now. So we're going to hit manage and select that lead unit, and the dashboard comes up so we can drive these now. We're going to start it all up. We need to turn our lights on, of course. And we're off. These two engines are now consisted using LocoFi. So we know the consist works on a test track, but what about in the real world? Well, To test it on a real layout, I've taken the locomotives to the SBHRS HO Scale layout on a Saturday morning, and we're going to pull a train around the layout.
So I'm just going to pick up these flat cars. I don't really have any specific plan here other than just to make sure this all works. But you can see it's working fine. And I'm excited because of how well it's working. So as you can see, LocoFi's consisting is fairly straightforward. I had to get some extra help from them because I wasn't understanding how the temporary Wi-Fi network had to be set up. The way I demonstrated the process is by using the network of one of the locomotives to create the consist. I did this because I knew I'd be taking the models to a layout somewhere else. If your LocoFi-equipped models never travel to other layouts, you can add them to your home Wi-Fi network as long as it extends into your layout room. The benefit to doing it that way is that the range is related to the strength of your home Wi-Fi and not the distance between your Android device and your locomotive. One other thing I have to mention is that I know the sounds of the locomotives are not accurate. The sounds in the modules are just what they came with. You can customize your LocoFi module sounds just by removing the flash memory card from the module and replacing the existing sound files with your own using a computer. That could be another video on its own, so let's just leave it at that for now. If you're interested in LocoFi, go to wiFiModelRailroad.com. On that site, you can find all kinds of information and helpful tutorials on things like customizing your sounds. If you'd like to share your experience with using LocoFi, feel free to leave a comment in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.